Such an honour to be able to welcome our next guest to the show, a legend of Australian basketball, an Australian Basketball Hall of Fame member competing in two Olympics for the Boomers, in Sydney in 2000 and in Beijing in 2008. And outside of that, an esteemed career that has covered all corners of the globe. He competed in the NBA, the NBL, in Russia, everywhere else in the world. That is just so many places where there's a basketball hoop. I'm sure this guy has shot a couple along the way. It is an absolute honour to welcome to Off the Podium the one, the only Mr. Chris Anstey. Chris, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on Off the Podium.
Thank you. It sounds like I'm really disloyal, doesn't it? When you reel off the teams I've played ball like that. It's I never wonder quite how it sounds.
Yes. You got to go where the balls are going in the hoop, right? And kind of where they want you and where you want to play. So that's fine. You're allowed to switch it up.
You got to go where you wanted.
Exactly. But I'm actually intrigued because obviously an esteemed career, and sort of as I just mentioned to you off air, sort of watched a few of your other interviews you've done, some of your other podcasts, and obviously a lot of people love to talk to you about your NBA days, your NBL days, and all that kind of stuff. But an Olympic specific one, do you often get sort of asked to just talk in general about your international career rather than sort of the other stuff?
Not often. And the NBA has, everybody wants to know about it because I guess when I went through, and even at this stage, pretty rare. But yeah, the Olympic stuff and representing Australia, it's one we speak about probably more in smaller circles, and it's one where if you ask me what was one of the highlights of my career, I'd tell you to be walking into that Olympic Stadium in Sydney with Andrew Gaze at the front waving the flag and having all of my basketball teammates from the men's and women's side right there front and centre, and hearing that roar when we walked in. But if you ask me what one of the lowlights would be, it would be exactly 2 weeks later when we couldn't get it done in the semi-final and then couldn't get it done in the bronze medal game. So it's been, I got back in 2008. I missed 2004 with an injury. And we spluttered the start. We're playing great basketball at the end of the Olympics in Beijing, but because we didn't start the tournament well, we crossed over against the USA. And again, that was probably the first time I've ever gone into a basketball game against a senior USA men's basketball team thinking we could win. And made a good fist of it in the first half, but Kobe Bryant went crazy in the third quarter, and they were too much. So as we fast forward and celebrate what the Boomers did in Tokyo, and Paddy Mills playing probably the best game of basketball I've ever seen anyone in an Australian jersey play, and that's a reasonably big comment, I understand. But as happy and as excited we are, it also brings back the disappointment that we couldn't bring that medal home or win it on home soil, 20 years earlier.
Yeah, it's so much to sort of look at there, because I think any basketball fan in Australia growing up would remember those moments. I mean, clearly I'm sitting here, decked out in Bulls attire, and clearly I grew up in the 90s, obviously, as you can probably understand then, Chris. But I vividly remember Sydney watching that, and it's always a highlight, I think, for basketball fans to watch that, and non-basketball fans too. It's the Boomers, it's the Opals. We love watching the basketball, and you ride those highs and lows with both teams at an Olympics, and until Tokyo, unfortunately for the Boomers, it was often quite a heartbreaking ending all the time.
Yeah, it was, and the interesting part is, as you get older and you're a little bit further removed from any experience you have on court or in an emotional environment, you see it a little bit differently. But at the time, we didn't start the Sydney Olympic Games well, and our coaching staff made the choice to play Ricky Grace more and to play Jason Smith more, and to play some of those lesser used players who were able to perform really well, especially Ricky, I think. But then when we got to the game that really mattered, we reverted back to what hadn't worked early in the tournament, which was how we remembered it at the time. Now, given the luxury of time that's passed, it was probably the right choice. But I guess in the moment, it made it probably harder for some of the guys to, especially in such a big loss. They were both blowouts. And that was the hard part, where I think any time you have a disappointing loss and you don't play much, or in fact you're injured or don't play at all, the ego in you would like to think that you could have contributed to a more positive result. And that was certainly the feeling within the group at some level. So I suppose there are a lot of levels of disappointment from a number of the players in the group, but the biggest one was exactly that. We didn't perform well, and Luke Longley missed that semi-final game, I believe, or maybe both the semi and the bronze. But there were certainly opportunities that weren't taken, and we couldn't step up in his absence.
I want to take a step back a little bit to the fact that you could have very much nearly gone to the Olympics in a completely different sport, Chris. For some people who may not be aware of, you were a pretty handy tennis player growing up and made the switch to basketball quite late by some standards. But did you ever sort of think that maybe if you were to go to an Olympics, it might be on a different court with a racket in your hand rather than a ball?
I never aspired to be an Olympian as a tennis player. For me, it probably wasn't an Olympic sport. It wasn't one that I considered when it was the Grand Slams. And I wanted to do that. I wasn't that good. I think when I made the change to basketball, it was an accidental change, but I was also realizing that there were a lot of players who were going past me. Coupled with, I grew up with Dustin Fletcher, who played AFL footy for a long time at Essendon, and we went through a period of time between 13 and 17 or 13 and 16 and a half where we honestly, we didn't lose a match in even the biggest tournaments around Australia, but
wow,
we could never get selected to go and represent the state or the country as a doubles combination. They'd just take the two best singles players who we'd continually beat in games of doubles. So we continually missed out. If it wasn't going to be in doubles, we weren't quite good enough as singles players, unfortunately. But no, the Olympics wasn't on the to-do list, I suppose, as a tennis player. The Grand Slams were, but I was very fortunate to find another sport that was a little bit more realistic for me.
It's interesting about Dustin Fletcher because I also believe you played with Mark Philippoussis, didn't you, as well?
I played against Mark, so Mark and I never played doubles together. Ironically, I beat Mark in my second last game of tournament play ever in one of the tournaments at Melbourne Park.
Wow.
Ended up beating him in a semi-final, lost in the final to Tasso Vasiliadis. I still remember, but they were both on the Australian team. Now, granted, Mark was a year and a little bit younger than me, so an age group below, and then had a few more months. So clearly, it's interesting when I speak about Mark or when I reflect on Mark. He had a tricky childhood, a lot of pressure on him. And to be honest, he wasn't the best junior going around. And there are a lot of people and a lot of commentary around the fact that Mark Philippoussis underachieved given the talent he had and the lack of Grand Slam results he had, because he did beat Pete Sampras at the Australian Open, but then lost to either Mark Woodford or Todd Woodbridge next round. I can't remember. But I'll tell anyone who listens that I think from where he came from, Mark Philippoussis overachieved to be as great as what he was, to have some of the wins he did. Because as I said, he certainly wasn't the best junior in the country or the state. He was talented and erratic and had a hard go of it. So I'm very, very respectful of what Mark was able to do and supported him from afar for a lot of years.
Still made 2 Grand Slam finals and then had a pretty trashy reality show, I think, many years later. Where he tried to find a wife or something, wasn't it? Yeah, one of those ones. You mentioned sort of an accidental switch to basketball. So how do you accidentally, I guess, change sports, which is a little bit different to tennis, of course?
Yeah, I filled in for my brother. My younger brother played a low-level game at Keilor, where I grew up, and they were short on numbers. And without going into all of the details of the night, I agreed to fill in eventually. Decided along the way that instead of kicking rocks and not really caring because I didn't want to be there, I'd try. And for me, all that meant was running. And I played tennis. I could move. So I tried, and in a 3-court basketball stadium with probably a dozen people who were watching the games that weren't involved in them. One of them was a junior basketball coach for the Melbourne Tigers basketball club. And he didn't get onto me for months. This was before mobile phones and social media and all those kinds of things. He was looking for the club I played for. Clearly I didn't play for one, so he failed, but somehow got a hold of me and convinced me to come down and try out. And I did, and enjoy. I'll say to people, I never loved basketball, but I loved the people in it, and I loved the fact that my height was considered a positive, not a point of difference. And there are a lot of reasons that didn't involve loving the game of basketball that kept me coming back. But the number one was Des Middleton at the start, and that group that I joined at the Melbourne Tigers, and then Al Westover and that same group of juniors that I went through with, that they were the ones who made basketball fun, and I grew to love the sport the longer I became involved in it, and probably the better I got at it.
When it came to the similarities between tennis and basketball, outside of the running, is there anything else that really comes to mind that helped you transfer over into basketball?
Yeah, I think it's footwork. I was surprised to learn that 7-footers were considered slow all the time. That hand-eye coordination, maybe depth perception, and I could always catch, I could always change direction, and I found some of the mobility things we had to do not came naturally because I'd worked on them for a lot of years on a tennis court, but I always needed to be as agile as smaller players, and I always thought that it was a cop-out for bigger basketball players to have a different set of targets for agility work and speed work than what the guards had. I just wanted to win. So I was pretty naive in that thought, but it served me well.
When it came, you mentioned before about tennis, the eyes were on the Grand Slams. When you switch into basketball and you sort of progress through those ranks, do you then go, okay, the NBA is a pinnacle, I want to make the NBL? Do you ever think of an Olympics possibility then when you start, progressing through the ranks of basketball?
Not for years. And it was almost a joke that I was still playing, and I was at the same club as Andrew Gaze and Mark Bradkin, Leonard Copeland, and even before I got into that NBL team, and I made that, and I played about 3 minutes a game that first year in 1994, and it wasn't until I met Brian Goorjian, who was a coach of the Southeast Melbourne Magic, and when he said those things that you've just said, actually, he told me he saw potential in me to represent the country and to really have a swing at being an NBA athlete. And I nearly left. I just thought that's the worst sales pitch I've ever heard. But then he went on and told me how, and told me that I'd be trying to represent the country with guys like Sam McKinnon, Jason Smith, Frank Drimmick, who were all on that similar kind of aspirational journey, I suppose. And all of us ended up representing the country, as did Tony Ronaldson, John Dorge, and a lot of those Southeast Melbourne Magic teammates of mine. So, once he started digging in and it became a reality or a potential reality, it was just a whole different level of work rate and commitment, dedication, all those sorts of cliches that you'll hear. But no, I never thought about it until I sat on a couch and looked Brian Goorjian in the eye, and he was the one that put it into my head.
Had you grown up watching the Olympics just as a kid? I mean, I saw a great interview that you did, and you mentioned your parents had woken you up, I think, as a young boy to watch the America's Cup. So I don't know if they were sort of, getting you in front of the couch every 4 years for an Olympics as well, were they?
Yeah, I would. And I was probably like anyone else, where it was more athletics and swimming and the events where you start at a point, you finish at a point, whoever gets there first wins. There weren't as many, or there wasn't as widely covered. I wasn't as interested in the team stuff. I always held that old school traditional, probably interest in the sports that had always been there, or the events that had always been there. Bigger, stronger, faster, all that sort of thing. Can you throw a javelin further? Can you run far? So I probably didn't watch those events as much, but I was a little bit like everyone else, where I got interested in the first basketball game, or the first series of basketball games I can remember watching were one or two back in Barcelona, when the Dream Team came, and you just saw a team that demolished everyone.
Yeah.
And you kind of got a glimpse of, you probably got an understanding that it wasn't fair. They were just too much better, and so much better than the rest of the world. And extrapolating that out a little bit, it's amazing how much the world's caught up to the United States in basketball as we sit here and talk today. So, no, look, again, the Olympics was for entertainment purposes, not aspirational.
You were part of the under-22 side that won the world champs in Melbourne, I believe, in your home city in 1997. You were the tournament MVP as well, though. So was that your first real taste of representing Australia, and kind of what was that experience like, being able to do that in a home court? Yeah,
it was great, and it was. I'd only represented my state a couple of times, having started so late, and I joined a silver medal winning under 17 or 19s team that Sam McKinnon, so the core of that group played in. And Ian Stacker, our coach, talks about the drive within that group who had just missed out last time to go one better, and I was a part of the group who, the group of three players, all the bigs, myself, Ben Pepper and Ben Melmoth, who were added to that group. Yes, we started the tournament badly. I'd come back at that stage from an NBA camp with the Dallas Mavericks, a summer league, and there was probably more pressure on me than I felt I deserved, and didn't perform well at the start. And it took getting out of the group and just leaving the hotel for a night to probably figure out what was important and just to go and be me. And, we ended up, due to those losses, crossing over against the United States, and to the best of my knowledge, was the first time an Australian men's basketball team had ever beaten the United States in any form. So we did that, and the belief after that game was incredible. We beat Argentina on the buzzer when Aaron Trahair hit what I still consider one of the biggest shots in Australian basketball history, and then ran over the top of Turkey in the gold medal game. So look, to do something for the first time or that's never been done before is special, and that in so many ways was a very, very special tournament.
Because obviously for you, big period, you're mentioning NBA was happening around that time and did all right in the NBL in the lead up to that. But once you do well in an international tournament, is that then when a switch flicks in your head? Well, Sydney's only a couple of years away. This could be all right. I might be with a chance here.
Yeah, I guess I did. But again, you get it's not like swimming or athletics where you commit 4 years of training to an event every 4 years. You've got NBL championships to win. I had the NBA to try to settle into. There were so many other basketball events happening and teams I needed to play for that it's in the back of your mind, I suppose, and it's an aspirational goal. And coming from the NBA, I suppose I thought I had to have been a chance, and I knew how well I was playing. But you've still got to do it. So to be named in that team was incredible. And as I mentioned right off the top, that one of the highlights of my career and probably the low light of my basketball career all happened within 2 weeks of each other.
Because it was obviously a very different time for basketball in Australia. NBL, peak NBL in the 90s. Just absolutely huge. And it's obviously, pretty much up there again to this day in a similar level. But I guess whereas today we've got so many Australians who are in the NBA, so many Australians who are doing so well in Europe. Back then, there was only a couple of you in the NBA at that stage, and a lot of it was coming from the NBL. How do you look back on how an Australian team was chosen back then versus now? Is one more reliant on, say, we've got NBA players, this is automatic, versus, we need to get the NBL guys, and if the NBA players are available, sort of a balance sort of between the two periods?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that, a little bit of style of play. Back then, you always knew that core group would get picked. Jays, Vlahov, Bradkey, Heel, Longley, all these guys would just walk up, start. So you're sort of essentially coming into a group, always understood you were playing for competing for 4 or 5 spots. So that was tricky. But I think the biggest difference we've seen with now the NBA players being available to play is the style of play that you see the Boomers playing. It's not an NBL domestic type style of play that suited that group. It's a more international style of play that allows for the improved skill sets. It allows the defensive strategies will deal better with the Luka Doncic's of the world and those tough European and NBA guys. So that's probably the biggest difference. Again, I think when we got selected, it was just Luke and I in that Sydney Olympic squad that were in the NBA. So certainly we had to go and readjust back to the system that they were using. And I didn't mind it because I'd played within first and thirds before, which was the offensive structure we ran. But, Luke hadn't seen anything like that for a long time. And, we probably didn't see much of him in the block and saw more of him out in the 3-point line. But no, it's just, I guess you don't get as much time together now as what you did then because players are being selected from around the world. So when you get them in, you simplify things, you put in place strategies that probably allow us or each individual to be in a position of success or to succeed. And, you take a swing, and I'm so glad we finally took a swing and connected and got that medal in Tokyo.
I know when it comes to, say, soccer, there's often that club versus country debate. And generally for an Olympics, obviously an Olympics is usually in an off season for the NBA. But is there ever much of a backlash in terms of the clubs in the NBA going, well, we don't want you to possibly get hurt in the Olympics or things like that? Or does it really come down to the players' decision? If they get selected, they can make that decision themselves?
Both. There's a love of the game contract, a clause in every NBA contract now that I believe Michael Jordan instigated, which allows players to represent their country and, in fact, to play in some of these other smaller tournaments. And we've just seen Chet Holmgren get injured in one, so it might be a touchy subject. But yeah, I think you see more and more current and high-level NBA players representing their countries now, because the NBA understands that there's a benefit to exposing its players to different styles of play, because there's a European style of play influence creeping into the NBA across all teams. And it's of great benefit to have their players involved in that at the highest level internationally in FIBA tournaments. So certainly the higher level players still play. It is a risk, and probably more of a risk for free agents who don't have a guaranteed contract. So to the best of my knowledge, if an NBA player gets injured representing their country, their contract is insured. If a free agent gets injured representing their country, they can't insure a contract because they don't have one. So there are a couple of uncontracted players at the moment playing over in the European Championships, and it'll be interesting to see how they do, whether that helps them get back in or whether, and we hope they don't, of course, get injured. So, look, it's personal preference, but when someone's paying you $100 million or tens of millions of dollars, they're going to have a say.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did you sort of, at that period for Sydney, because that was around about the time your time ended with Chicago, so were you in that period of your time in the NBA was over, I can do this, or were you still in that process of, I might be, get drafted by another team? Sort of, what was that?
No, look, I chose to do it, and I was certainly trying to get another contract, and the Bulls had requested that I stay throughout the summer and not play in the Olympic Games to work on the strength and conditioning element of the game and some skill work with their own coaches, but they wouldn't guarantee me a contract. So in my mind, I could have potentially missed out on both. Now, I'll always be proud and happy the choice I made to play or to make myself available for the Sydney Olympics. But certainly if the Bulls had have said, here's $10 million for 3 years, now make that choice, it would have been a much harder choice to make.
Which I guess also the difficult thing about that too, a home Olympics as well. It's not just an Olympics, it's a home Olympics as well. So that would have been a very tricky decision.
Yeah, look, it was once in a lifetime. We will get another one in Australia, we now know, but to play in one was once in a lifetime. But there's always the argument as well that to earn money that will set your family up and last maybe 2 lifetimes is also very tempting. So it's a tough choice. I would like to have thought I would have been able to do both, and I would have fought for that, but it would have been a harder choice.
Must be a fascinating experience when you get to Sydney for those Olympics in the lead up. I mean, you've played in the NBA, you played at the peak for club basketball, and no doubt experienced some amazing things over there. But then to switch focus to an international tournament and Olympics in your home country, I mean, were you prepared for kind of everything that came with that? Obviously, you talked about entering that stadium, but just in the lead up and how much Sydney got behind those Olympics.
Yeah, it's funny because we don't really experience that much. You only get the stadium. You don't, as a participant of an Olympic Games, you're not out at the bars or out in the city, and you're not attending all of the things that the fans and spectators do that really create that environment. We're sitting in an Olympic Village as basketball players competing in an event that starts on day 1 and finishes on day 14. And you've got athletes stretching, you've got recovery, you've got training. That's all you get. So you really don't get a sense of that. It's only been, I've had a greater sense of that even watching my own daughter play at a junior world championships, or going to a tournament and involving myself in that. And I love it. But you just don't get a sense as a player because you're there to do a job.
That opening ceremony, though, as you mentioned, incredible, highlight of your career. To have Andrew Gaze, legend, obviously carry that flag as well. I mean, what was the mood like in the Boomers for those Olympics? Obviously, the disappointment of Atlanta getting so close then. They'd gotten 4th in Seoul. Was there that just mood in the camp that we're going to get a medal this time around? We're ready. This is going to happen.
Yeah, we thought look, one of the most disappointing things I've written this was our Coach Barry Barnes had come up with a motto with the group, and it was medal or bust. and we had MOB written on these hoodies that we had made up. We wore them around the village, and that was our mantra: medal or bust. When we failed in our attempt to win a medal, there were a lot of us who were really disappointed that, in the press conference after, and it became a secret, we never told anyone what they stood for, but in the press conference after, Barry went and said it stood for men's Olympic basketball. And we didn't own the fact that we failed. We owned the fact that, or we presented the fact that we did really well, which we did, but we failed on what we set out to do. But now look, it's interesting when fast forward, and again, as great as that Olympic, the opening ceremony was, I'd never do it again. And I didn't do it in Beijing because you're on your feet for 4 or 5 hours. You herded into a stadium before that, and you play the next day, you're exhausted. And you'd never, the greatest distraction of the Olympic Games is the Olympic Games themselves. And we were flat that first game and we lost. And, Andrew Bogut and I sat in the room in Beijing. We tried to convince the players not to go to the opening ceremony. We sat back and watched everyone else win. We lost the first game to Croatia, who we'd beaten twice in the weeks leading up. They were sitting at home recovering, and we were flat. So I'd always say, and I know Paddy and the team carried the flag in Tokyo, but it was a greatly abbreviated ceremony. Don't do it. I'd much rather have a medal around my neck and talk about that the rest of my life than have that day of experience being in a stadium and being a part of it, because it takes so much out of you to be a part of an opening ceremony. And I don't regret much because it was great, but I wish we hadn't have gone, because that might have made the difference between fourth and first, second or third.
Because you mentioned a few times about the not getting off to a good start aspect, which lose the opening 2 games in Sydney, and ultimately end up finishing third in that group. Very tight group, of course, but ultimately, as you said, it's a difference between finishing a couple of positions here and there. So when you go into a tournament like this as a team, obviously you're thinking about a medal, but do you still take to the point, like, we've got to start off well because that will set a tone for the rest of the tournament?
Yeah, I don't think we did that well enough in either of those 2 Olympic Games, but yeah, absolutely. And, experience will tell you that first game, the very first quarter of the first game is just as important as the fourth quarter of your final pool game when it comes to giving yourself the best chance of a favourable crossover, and in turn the best chance of a medal. The 2 Olympic Games I was a part of, we didn't get favourable crossovers, although we made the semi-finals in Sydney. But one of the best games of international basketball I've ever been a part of, at the highest level, was we'd never beaten Lithuania in international competition. And they were undefeated in Beijing. We beat them by 30. We were flying. We'd beaten Russia comfortably, and they were a powerhouse. But it was too late because we'd lost that game to Croatia and we crossed over against the USA. Crossing over against an Italy or someone, I feel like we were playing well enough to medal in Beijing, but we finished outside the top 8, outside the top 4, because we came across the USA.
I'm glad you mentioned Lithuania, because that was my next question, because I remember as a kid hating Lithuania in basketball because they beat us in Atlanta, they beat us in Sydney, and then you go and get that revenge in Beijing. I don't think people today realise that rivalry we had with Lithuania for a little period of time there, Chris.
It's interesting because they're such a dominant basketball nation, and as I was introduced to international basketball, we kept hearing about Lithuania, but in the same breath we also heard about how much of an underdog we were as a small country, as Australia, and our small population. And you think, hang on a sec, that doesn't compute in my head. Lithuania are a thousandth the size of Australia, and their population smaller, yet we're calling them a powerhouse. So I never liked that underdog mentality that we carried around with us or lent into for a lot of years that I was involved. I was naive enough to think that we should be able to compete with some of these nations because we were actually bigger and had more players. We just, I suppose I didn't like the built-in excuse that if we didn't get it done, we're underdogs anyway. And I'm really glad to see the Boomers cultures evolve into that now.
And is that something that sticks in that mental aspect in any form of the game, be it NBA, NBL, Olympics, that if you've got a side which there's maybe a bit of a boginess against them that you just can never seem to beat, that you go into those games thinking a little bit differently?
Sometimes, and I've had experiences in NBL games where the teams I was playing for hadn't been able to beat a team in years, and as much as they'll stand in front of you and say, yeah, we think we can win, until you actually demonstrate that you can, that belief's not the same. So I think oftentimes you need proof, and getting a victory against anyone changes your mindset from I think we can to I know we can, because we've seen it, we've done it, and that has to help confidence. So doing, as I mentioned earlier, doing something for the first time is really difficult, but when you do, it opens up the possibilities of doing so many even bigger and better things.
You mentioned obviously Beijing and Sydney. Athens ultimately didn't happen. Injury. Tell us what happened there and how disappointing was it to miss out on Athens?
I didn't watch a second. I went on holiday and didn't turn the TV on. That was my way to cope. I was gutted. For me, I saw Athens as an opportunity to have a bigger role, to positively impact the group. That the core group I'd mentioned before: Longley, Vlahov, Bradkey, Gaze, Keel. Actually, Shane played, but the core group that had carried the nation through the previous 3 and 4 Olympic Games had retired. Guys like John Rillie, Jason Smith, Sam McKinnon was a big part. I just saw it as a really great opportunity to be a bigger part on the floor, and to not be able to do that, especially when, I think we finished 9th off the top of my head, but I did go back and watch a little bit of it, but at the time it was just too hard. And I went on holidays, I didn't watch it, came back and did everything I could to be ready for the next time.
And then Beijing comes along, and you talk about that previous generation, but then you're in Beijing with this new generation. You mentioned Bogut, Paddy Mills' first Olympics, of course, too. I mean, what was that like, transitioning from a Sydney Olympics where you've got this golden generation of men's basketball players coming to the end, and now you're sort of at the opposite, where you've got this new golden generation of men's basketball players right at the beginning of their career?
Yeah, for me it was, I always believed that I was probably one of the last people picked on that team, and my role I always knew would be smaller. Again, Athens would have been my wheelhouse when I was playing great. But having said that, I just won the most valuable player award of the National Basketball League. We won a championship. But yeah, my role I saw was to back up Bogut, to back up Dave Anderson, to be a level head for a guy who wasn't going to play probably that many minutes unless required. And that probably alleviate a lot of the pressure to perform, which probably didn't feel much often anyway. But for me, it was about the enjoyment of it. And probably personally, I played as well as I had in international competition. I shot the ball really well. I had some good results. We mentioned we beat Lithuania and Russia, but still disappointed we couldn't do better. But you mentioned Paddy Mills, Joe Ingles was one that you didn't mention. It was their first Olympic Games, and they were both incredible to be around. And we still remember them, being in awe of Team USA, and in fact asking for autographs. We're like, hang on, we're about to play against these guys. And I say that not to make fun of those two as very, very young players, but to show how far that they've come. I marvel at how well they've both done, and other guys have done from that group, to have seen them as very young players, as we all were, but to continue that growth in their journey to be, the players they are, not only for Australia, but in the NBA today.
I love hearing stories like that, because often when we get guests on the show here and we talk about your village experience where you're bumping into other athletes, often people on this show will say, oh, and I got to see Kobe Bryant, I got to see Kevin Durant. Whereas for you, they're just your colleagues and that you're playing with them. But the one story I'd love for you to share with us on the show, I know you've shared this multiple times, but I need you to share it, is the Michael Jordan game and your idea to try and get a photo with Michael Jordan in the one game you played against him in the NBA.
Well, I was only ever going to get one chance to play him, and I'd been starting sort of 30-odd minutes a game. I looked it up. And so getting to the game, my family, my friends were there. It was like the Beatles had come to town. The drive took twice as long. And I remember all of these different emotions and different moments within it. And the first one was actually rushing to get changed to get out on the court and see him. And I sort of remember picking up the ball at half court and backing back towards my basket as I watched Michael Jordan shooting around, just thinking this is real. Transitioning into one of the last things our coach Don Nelson told us was that Sean Bradley would start and I wouldn't. which, I was disappointed with that, but I thought it won't take long to get in, and didn't play a second in that first half, and we were down. And, my mindset at half time, I'm normally really good and invested in everything a coach says, but I'm thinking, geez, like you said, how do I get a photo with Michael Jordan? And I'm almost hoping for garbage time where I might get in, where we're getting blown out. He might still be on the floor, because this is before social media. It's before the games were televised here in Australia. It wasn't written much about. And my thought was, my tennis mates aren't going to believe this. And so all I thought at half time when I came in, I thought, if I get in and it's garbage time and Jordan's in, I'm going to hit him, foul him so hard as soon as I possibly can, so hard that we'll start a fight, and somebody has to take a photo of that. I say to people, it wasn't my best thought, but it was my only one at the time. And I was glad it didn't come to that. I got substituted in early in the third quarter, and it became this surreal experience of they're flying up and down the floor. Sort of, I've started to use the analogy of when a dog's running up and down the beach, its ears are flapping everywhere, its tongue's going. You're like, I'm running. I'm like, I'm playing Michael Jordan. And then I realised how bad I was going. I hadn't touched the ball, and I got myself a couple of free throws and shot two of the worst free throws I could have ever shot. All I could think of when I was standing on the free throw line right in front of the Bulls bench was, they must be frantically looking through their notes going, who's that? I just didn't feel like I belonged. And when I missed those two free throws, again, one of those clear memories was, God, I couldn't get any worse. I'm about to be dragged. That was my 2-minute opportunity done. I thought, well, I might as well enjoy the next 30 or 40 seconds until I get subbed out. And, I got a rebound and touched the ball a few times and didn't get dragged. But, if this was a different environment, I'd say to people, I stopped caring what people thought, and I just started enjoying myself. And I had a really good second half. We came back. Cedric Ceballos hits a three to send us into overtime, and I end up playing the last 3.5 minutes of overtime and scoring a couple of times and getting a rebound against Dennis Rodman. And he had 30 for the game probably, but I had 3, but I had 1. And we won. And it's just this moment where you reflect back and you think a couple of things. I've never lost a game of basketball to Michael Jordan.
Exactly.
And he's not calling me for a rematch. But I suppose you learn more now. It was towards the end of the year. It didn't matter as much for them. But, there are these moments out there all the time. I'll never forget that. And there's often times when you enter a game like that, this sense of, I suppose, a sense of knowing what the result will be. It's a foregone conclusion. We don't win this one. But, allowing yourself to be naive to the thing, you could succeed at things that most people think you can't. And that game for me was one of them. And I would hazard a guess to say that no one on the Bulls roster would remember the game, but everyone on the Mavericks roster does. That became one of my more memorable games throughout my basketball career, of course, to play against Michael Jordan.
Well, you made it on to the last dance, a little scuffle with Dennis Rodman.
My whole basketball career was reduced to a 2-second snippet through lockdown, which I got more calls about that than I have anything else in probably since, one of my kids was born. I haven't had that many messages.
Which, did you ever get a chance to get a photo with MJ, Bulls days, if you came to training, things like that?
No, I didn't. Screenshots of videos is what people have sent me over the years, but I've never been anyone to go and get photos with anyone like that. I'd much prefer to be in the moment, listen to what they're saying, treat them as normal human beings and not impose on their time, knowing that they get that all the time. And it's, I've sort of crept into running these events now and running some other things where we're around some high-profile people, and the instructions always think of the 10 questions they get asked all the time, and the things they get asked for the photo. Don't go anywhere near them. Enjoy being there. I'll organise a group photo at the end, but as soon as you go and ask for a photo or ask that question that the person's sick of answering 100 times a day, there's a divide between you and them. You're not treating them as the human being, you're treating them as a public figure. So I'm always fascinated more so to get into a room behind closed doors with no cameras and have these moments of time with people. And Michael Jordan did turn up to practice a few times, and I was very happy to sit back and be around the periphery and just observe and say g'day on the way past, and that was about it.
How am I going, Chris, in terms of the 10 questions you always got asked? Have I answered about 7 of them? Asked about 7 of them so far?
It's funny. I'll say to people all the time, if you walk up and ask me how tall I am, or make comment about my height or my son's height, your conversation's done.
All right. Well, there goes that next question. Thanks for letting me know that one.
Look, it was funny. I'll tell you a story about my daughter. She's at UCLA at the moment, and I've had this conversation with her, and she's been lucky to meet some of my basketball friends who are reasonably high profile over the years, and she sees them just as them, which is so great in so many ways. But she was invited. She's at UCLA at the moment. She was invited to the premiere. I think the movie was called Hustle, with Adam Sandler, LeBron James, and some others. And she actually got to meet LeBron and to meet Adam Sandler and to meet Boban and a few of those other NBA guys. And while people were scuffling for autographs and photos and sneaking up behind and trying to take the secret selfie, Adam Sandler walked by and, I made eye contact, and she sort of said, God, Adam, I'm fascinated to know you travel a lot. Where's your favorite coffee place when you come to Hollywood? And, and it was the coffee place that she goes to, and they had maybe this 20-second interaction. She never asked for a photo. She treated him like a human being and asked a question relevant to him, the person, not him, the movie star. And fantastic. I was proud of her for doing it. And she had a couple of short conversations with others, but never took the photo and never fangirled them, just treated them as human beings. And when she told me that story, I probably told her how proud I was of her for acting that way and treating them like that. But maybe I didn't do a good enough job. But no, she's in a good place, Izzy, at the moment.
That's a great story. Fantastic. And it's so fascinating you say that, though, and particularly with what you're doing now, because you played in the NBA. You were playing against these people who people still to this day idolize. It was just your job. So you're around that all the time. So they are just colleagues. They're regular people. And it's fascinating on that crossover of when, say, like you're at the Olympics and you might bump into a Rafael Nadal in Beijing or a Roger Federer, people like this who, if you had have continued your tennis career, also would have just been colleagues. So it's interesting, I guess you would see even at the Olympics that crossover of athletes who are themselves high profile, very respected people, but who are also still just people. And, oh my God, look who these people are.
You know what? I grew up playing tennis. I'm a tennis fan, and a tennis coach friend of mine invited me to dinner a few Australian Opens ago, and it turned out that we had dinner with Boris Becker, sort of a group of 8 of us, and we sat around and we chatted, and it's exactly that. We shared stories and offered to pick up the bill and all that, or the tab and that kind of thing, and he paid. And my throwaway line at the end of a really nice 3-hour dinner, not only with Boris Becker and his wife, was some other really fun people at the table, but my throwaway line was, mate, I appreciate you paying for dinner. If you want to get away from the tennis crowd, we're actually having a dinner with my mates on Thursday night in the restaurant next door. You feel free to drop in and we'll pull up an extra seat. And he turned up.
Wow.
And I just thought, and I told my mates, and they thought it was incredible. And I had this same sort of conversation, but I just still reckon that that's where the crossover lies and where I am now with what I do, is that I can see both sides. I just reckon there are some incredible stories to be told, but you don't get them if you ask what everybody else has asked. And I'm really passionate about, we're bringing Luke down to you in Hobart in a few weeks' time, and Luke Longley, and he's got this incredible story, but he's really hard to get in front of. And he's quite the introvert if you don't know him. So for him to trust us to help share his story in person for the first time, we hope that we're trying to, we're doing the right thing, not only by the people we're bringing into the room, but by the inverted commas talent themselves, where we want to look after everyone and share their stories in the right spirit. And we think that there are a lot of basketball stories that need to be told and have benefit of being told, because just to use Luke Longley as an example, his story transcends basketball. The lens that he got to see greatness through and the lens he saw his own career through is fascinating. I've been lucky to hear it behind closed doors, and I can't wait to hear what people think after they've listened to him. But these are the sort of things we love doing.
You know, I'm going to be there. I mean, hello, what am I wearing right now? So it's something that I'm not exactly going to be missing. But I mean, it's great ideas, because I think one thing I find doing this show, it is those stories. And yeah, there are the questions that everybody wants to know. And even if you've answered it 100 times in interviews, some people might not have heard it. But like, my job is I always like to try and find those angles of, okay, well, what haven't they answered before? And say with this interview, Chris, where, as I said at the top of the interview, 95% of the time you've been asked about your time in the NBA, the NBL, and all valid, great career you've had there, obviously, but this is a different one. And, you know, opportunity for you to tell that side of the Olympics that maybe not a lot of people ask about, versus that one Michael Jordan question that clearly I also asked today.
No, and look, it's a fun story to tell. I'm always happy to tell it. But, you know, it's, again, I love storytelling, and actually the storytelling in itself is what we're trying to do. Like, I wrote a book. I never thought I'd write a book, but I wanted, the reason I did it was to tell these incredible stories and share these incredible lessons from incredible people I've been around. You know, understanding that not everyone's going to get to hear them, and I've been in a privileged position to be there. But one story that I do like sharing, I'll share with you, and feel free to cut it out. But, you know, my basketball journey is a long time ago, and I've learnt more from being around and not competing in the sport and being able to observe through a different lens. And yeah, my daughter Izzy used to love Dirk Nowitzki, still does, as a matter of fact. But Dirk was, you know, I used to name drop Dirk to my daughter because it was funny, and she went and did really well and made her first Australian team at under 17, and ended up taking a charge and fracturing a couple of vertebrae in her back a week before the tournament. She was devastated. Nothing could cheer her up for weeks, and Dirk actually sent her a jersey with a note in it saying, make sure you keep working, your next opportunity will come. And so anyway, Dirk went from being Izzy's favourite player to her idol. She put the jersey on, she danced around, she hugged herself, she smiled for the first time in weeks. And anyway, you fast forward, and Izzy was playing well enough to get some college offers. And for the listeners who know how that college recruitment process goes, you 48 hours at each school, and you pack things in. So we're exhausted after 3 visits. We're sitting at Detroit Airport, and I sort of, the dorky dad, you know, Dale, when we get to Fort Worth, you know, we were going to Texas Christian University. That was one of the schools on Izzy's list because her best friend went there. So why don't we jump in an Uber? We'll go into Dallas where your mum and I lived, show you where we lived before you were around, maybe introduce you to some friends, and just the dorky parent thing. You know, she's grumpy. No, I'm tired. Just get in my room service, Netflix. She had a nap. We asked her again, same response. She slept on the plane. We'd asked her 4 or 5 times, and we got to the hotel lobby. And as she was walking up to the room, turned her back on me with the hotel key. I said, for one last time, like, yes, I'm begging you. You know, just go up, get changed, jump in an Uber with me. I know you're tired. Come and meet some friends. I'd love to share where I spent 2 of my really incredible years with my daughter. It meant a lot to me. And now she's grumpy. Like, Dad, I've told you I'm tired. I'm getting ready for tomorrow. I'm going to watch Netflix. I'm going to order room service. And like, she turned away, and I couldn't help myself. And I wasn't going to tell her till the next day. I said, that's a real shame because we're going to Dirk's house for dinner and he was looking forward to meeting you.
Wow.
And she stopped and she turned and she said, what? I said, but I'll just tell him that you're too tired and you go into your room for room service. And you've never seen someone's mood change more quickly. You've never seen a teenage girl get changed. I didn't know she had the nice clothes. She had the spider eyelashes that she thinks look great but look like there are spiders on her eyes. And we're in an Uber 15 minutes later to go and have dinner at Dirk's house. And it was the most normal night. We just sat and we caught up. But Izzy got to be in a room with her idol. Dirk got to ask Izzy questions. She got to ask Dirk questions. It was 3 or 4 hours. We just sat and we talked. We told old stories, and she was a part of that. And if she was sitting next to me now, she'd tell you that was one of the best days of her life. That, you know, not only did she get to meet her idol, but her idol invited her to keep in touch, and was so much better than what she could have imagined. But what I say to anyone who listens, and especially coming out of COVID, is that Izzy said no to the best night of her life 5 times because she couldn't be bothered. And that was one of my and her great, learnings, and a story I love telling, because there'll be people here listening who, it's so easy to say no coming out of COVID, and it's so easy to say no to things in life because we can't be bothered. And it's really hard to say yes to things that may be uncomfortable, but just do it. I mean, the best day of your life might be out there, and if it's not, who cares? You'll learn something from a shit experience. So no, that was one that has changed my daughter Izzy's perspective on the way she approaches things that maybe historically she couldn't have been bothered doing. And I love sharing the story because it's relevant to my family, and it was one that I saw with my own eyes, and I've seen the result, and I just thought it might be relevant.
It's a fantastic story. Thank you for sharing that. I've got a follow-up on Izzy, but one thing I need to ask just as follow-up to you, Chris, who would be your person that if you were having a shit day and you said no 5 times, and then all of a sudden somebody said to you, oh, this person's waiting, we're going to their house getting an Uber, who would that one person be for you?
Yeah, well, I'd love to sit around a table have a chat with people like Roger Federer, maybe John McEnroe. But on that era growing up as a tennis fan, I just think there'd be a fascination in, can you imagine sitting around a table where no cameras, no nothing, and just hearing some stories from Bill Clinton, for example?
Yeah.
There are so many incredible, again, stories that we as the general public only get the public version. It's so great hearing some of those stories and being involved. I don't know, that'd be 3 that come to mind without too much thought, but I could put myself in a room with anyone. You know what? The florist around the corner could probably tell me as many stories as that, and I'd be just as interested.
Great answer. I definitely agree with that. I mean, on Izzy, obviously doing quite well for herself. What would it mean to you if one day she was able to pull on an Opals jersey and go to an Olympics just like her dad?
I wouldn't care. I don't care what she chooses to do, as long as she's happy doing it. Watching her represent Australia as a junior was an incredible experience. I was incredibly proud, but she wanted to be there. I don't mind if Izzy doesn't want to play basketball. I think basketball has and will continue to teach her lessons that, will set her in good stead for things much bigger than basketball. That's what sport does for us people who play it, I think. So whatever Izzy wants to do with basketball is her platform, that's great. But I hope it's not the only thing, because she's much smarter than what I was, and she's very aspirational. So I hope that she plays for as long as she enjoys it. I hope she uses what she learns from the sport and through being in a team and through traveling and through understanding different cultures, because that's what basketball also teaches us to, be whoever it is that she wants to be. And I'll be her number one fan for as long as she's doing whatever it is she wants to do.
We'll definitely be keeping an eye to see how that all plays out, of course. Chris, we like to wrap up with a set of fun get-to-know-you style questions, which I'll get to in just a moment. 2 quick things. You retired in 2010. Was there ever a temptation to push on towards London and another Olympics?
No, there wasn't. I never wanted to be that player who people are looking at, why won't he just retire? And, I wanted to go out on my own terms. And it was forced a little bit. I had a pretty major hip surgery. I feel like I had a couple more years of good basketball in me, but probably didn't have that young up-and-coming big that I felt like I could come off the bench behind and help mentor perhaps as someone in a smaller role, which I would have quite happily done. But no, happy retiring when I did, and probably flirted with a comeback at one stage, but had a beer, gave myself a slap in the face, and that didn't last very long at all.
Another one I got to ask is a proud Tasmanian, Jack Jumpers. Talk them up, Chris. How good was that first season? How are you thinking going to go in season 2? It was
incredible. You know what? I forget being a Tassie. I'll say to anyone that was one of the sporting stories in Australian sport last year for me, or this year for me. I'm very, very quick to put my hand up. I don't like being the person who said I saw that happen. I didn't. I struggled to see how they'd score enough points to bother too many teams. I struggled to see how they'd win many more than a handful of games. What Scott Ropp was able to do, and love it. In fact, Scott Ropp was actually one of my assistant coaches at the Dallas Mavericks, so it's good to see him doing well. Nice. But what he was able to do with that group and the improvement the group was able to make as a whole was incredible. I'm fascinated to see them this year because the only benefit they had last year was that no one gave them any chance of doing anything. So whatever they did was going to be a bonus. Now they've come off a championship series appearance and there's going to be increased pressure. It would be an amazing accomplishment if they were to play playoffs again. I think that's where their goal needs to sit. But I'll tell you what, that crowd in all of the final series, I say this, it was as close to a college environment as I've seen. And that's great. And I love the fact that you've got a national team in Tasmania. I hope that the AFL gets down there quick because you know how to support sport. And I hope that the corporate support, this is where my level of expertise stops. I hope that there's enough down there to support as many sports as possible because I used to love coming down as a player. I still love coming down to do these sort of things. And now one of the stories of the year for me.
Because that's the thing when you said about coming down as a player. I grew up in the Devils period and just loved every single weekend going to the games and just some of my fondest childhood memories. And then to have that come back was just, absolutely incredible. So it's great that it started off well and we obviously hope it continues that way. Another thing, Chris, actually quickly too, you're a bit of a podcast yourself now. You've got a podcast, sort of some of the media stuff. How do you find podcasting, being able to sort of share stories with other people on your show and some of your stories as well?
Yeah, I enjoy it. As you say, enjoy sharing stories. We'll see if it gets up again this year, but there's always a different slant. It's so easy to pick flaws and to pick negatives, and it's easy to tell those stories and have those opinions. It's sometimes harder to go and dig for these really positive stories or to perhaps see a player struggle from a different perspective instead of laying the boots in, maybe dig into, why it's not as easy as what it seems from afar. So I like coming from that angle. I love sharing those perspectives and, however many mediums we get to do that on, that's great, whether it's podcasts, whether it's written, whether it's events, we'll continue to try to tell those stories.
Well, we look forward to seeing, hearing, watching all of those, of course, along the way. Now, Chris, we wrap up every interview, series of get-to-know-you style questions. Now, these were questions posed to Team Canada athletes ahead of Rio and Pyeongchang. And as I will always point out, if you feel like it, there's a drawing element. You don't have to. I don't know how you are at your drawing, but if you want some homework this afternoon, you can draw a picture of your teammate here. You can draw a picture of it's a Canadian animal, an Australian animal. Again, up to you. How are your drawing skills?
They're below par. My 7-year-old son's probably better than me, but
we'll get him to draw Dad.
The drawing may not get done, but I'm fascinated.
Get him to draw Dad at the Olympics. There's one for you. Start off with this one. If you could choose any Olympic host city, where would it be?
No, it has to be Melbourne.
Yeah. Great that we're going to Brisbane. Obviously fantastic. Sydney, but, come back to Melbourne. Pretty much everything's ready to go, right?
One of the greatest parts about, like I said, it's a bit of a distraction anyway, but the thing about these satellite major events is that you don't get that one village to the bet. So you're splitting up all of the athletes. I'm not sure it would have been as great an experience if all of the sports went together at Homebush or the village. So it's going to be a very different experience for the athletes spread across multiple cities.
Yeah. Do you hope to sort of obviously, 10 years in the future, but with Brisbane, some sort of involvement, be it with basketball, the Olympics in general? Would you look at something
my involvement? I'm very, very happy to be all care and no responsibility and to go and be a fan and to get to whatever events and sports I want and hopefully do with some good mates.
And push towards gold for the Boomers in Brisbane. We will win gold, of course.
They'll always be a shot. We've got Josh Giddey and Dyson Daniels and Therese Proctor and some of the current groups of guys who'll still be around. And I say guys wearing an Opals Women's World Cup top, but I think it's both. There are some incredible stories on both, and I've been around the women's game for a long time, and there's some great young girls coming through as well. So as excited for both, I've just probably been closer to the men's side for a little bit longer.
Double gold in Brisbane, let's call it now. In your spare time, what do you most like to do?
Any other sport. I still love playing tennis. I've been playing paddle, which is a new sport that's huge in Europe. But I'll play golf. I'll always find my way to mates, and I'll always find a way to have a beer afterwards.
Paddle, is that the one where you kind of got like a paddle and it's like squash, but like on
a cross between squash and tennis, outdoor. Yeah. It's such a fun game, and you can play across all levels. It's good fun.
Yeah, I've heard of that. It seems very interesting. The weirdest instruction a coach ever gave you was?
To go out at halftime of a game in Italy for my Russian team, look up at the moon and stare to draw energy from the moon because our energy wasn't as good as what it should have been in the first half.
Wow. Stare at the moon. Okay.
Stare at the moon. Draw energy from the moon.
Were you werewolves or something? Like, I mean...
the thing was, we ended up winning.
Wow. Okay. There's the secret to success.
I don't know if it worked or not, but dust on our shoes, and it was an interesting one.
Okay, then. There's coaching 101 right there. What is your favourite workout?
Playing sport, a game of tennis, a set of tennis, a game of pickup basketball with mates. I don't want to go for a long run. I will ride a little bit, but something that's competitive and change of direction and fun. Growing up, who was your favourite sporting team? John McEnroe was my favourite sports person. I never really had a team. The Western Bulldogs, and still is. So I was thinking basketball and all these other global sports. But I was going to say, you're from Melbourne, Chris. There's got to be a footy team somewhere. I've even got my mug I'm drinking from right now. You wouldn't believe. Look at that. So, yeah. There you go. I don't like. I tell you what. The one AFL Grand Final I've been to was 2016. So right. I've always got a sauce. I mean, you can probably see my Carlton hat hiding down the bottom there, so we don't talk about that. It was incredible. It was all of our family. We grew up around the corner from the Western Oval, and we've always gone. So did you go to the grand final in 2016? I sure did, with my brothers and my dad. It was incredible. One of my favourite experiences of that game was I was near a man who obviously got tickets with like his wife and kid, but they all got separated. So then they all came together, and just watching them cry and hug each other, like it was just the most insane experience. It was probably us. That's exactly what we did. We all had individual tickets. We switched them out for standing room only. Clearly we can see. We can see over the top of any crowd because my brothers and dad are all tall as well. But we stood at the back of that first tier of seats. We had a good view of the ground. We were 4 steps from the bar, and again, I haven't seen Dad cry. It was just an incredible day. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Your favourite sandwich is? Oh, there's one for you. That's not one of the 10, is it, Chris? You've never had that one before. A BLT. I'll go a BLT. Anytime I go to the States, it's close to the healthiest thing I can get. That is very true. That is very true. If you could have one superpower, what would it be? One superpower? To go back in time or to have more time. One of the two. I'm not sure which one. You could have both. This is Off the Podium. You're allowed to have multiple. The best candy in the world is? Just plain old dairy milk chocolate for me. Oh, yes. Good answer. It's a shame that Cadbury factory here in Hobart, you can't go to it anymore. But really? Okay. Did you ever go to that back when you'd come down here? I have been years ago. But no, clearly not for a long time. They sadly stopped the tours a long time ago, and you can't even go to the shop anymore. So it's just there. But that's a shame. It is a big shame. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be? I always tell people it's a wrong question to ask. Ask me who I want to live with and I'll give you that answer. But it's always going to be with mates and family, and wherever they are, I want to be. Couldn't care less. When you were little, what was one thing you always thought? One thing I always thought when I was little? One thing I always thought, I was naive enough to think I could do things really well, and that I could be different. And, I still remember even at year 10, 11, 12, going into those career information nights and having a session with the career counsellor and being told I had to take those sessions seriously when I told them I was going to be a professional athlete. They didn't understand my drive to be really good at whatever I do. And that was all it is. I never wanted to be better than anyone. I just wanted to be as good as I could be. And I think I've always wanted to do things better than what I currently am.
Did you ever go back to those career counsellors and went, I told you so?
The school asked me to come back and speak years later, and I told the story, and you saw them all spitting their coffee out, and I said, hey, and I talk about pathways. They're not for everyone, but it's, I don't like the term. I don't like the term pathway. You can be on whatever pathway you want. It's how you walk along them and the people you take with you that'll get you to where you're going, not the actual path you're on. And tell people Dustin Fletcher and I were living examples of that.
Exactly. Great answer. Last one for you, Chris. Now, this is one that you've either got or you don't. What is your favourite joke to tell?
Oh, no, I don't. And I certainly wouldn't be telling them on this sort of...
not quite that level.
No, it's fair to say my oldest son, Ethan, and I like going to comedy nights. If I could tell you, I'll name drop another guy, a good mate of mine who's living in Tassie at the moment up in Launceston, is Chris Franklin. I enjoy my nights with him and the jokes he tells. I like getting to Jim Jeffries when he was touring around a few months ago, and I sit in that sort of space. But as for one joke, probably couldn't give you one.
It's all right. That's Off the Podium after dark, basically, coming soon. Chris, before I let you go, mate, social media, websites, anywhere people can sort of stay up to date with you and what you've got going on at all?
You know what? I'm Chris Anstey 13 anywhere, but depending on where your listeners are, check it out. And I'd love for anyone to hear Luke Longley's story. You can find tickets through my Instagram, through my Facebook page. Anywhere you can find me, you'll find the tour we're doing with Luke in a few weeks' time. And we're down in Hobart on the 7th of October at West Point Casino. We're doing Melbourne, Hobart, Perth. We've just added a Brisbane show. We're going to Bendigo. So we can't wait to go and do that. But jump on, have a conversation on social. Social media is not all bad if you can get into some conversation. So jump on and have a chat.
Chris, I've been absolutely thrilled to have a chat with you today, mate, on the show and learn about your great international career and everything else in between. We really appreciate your time, and good luck ahead for Izzy and everything else. And we'll see you in Brisbane. Maybe not on the court, but some capacity.
We'll be there. Brisbane, Hobart, we'll be all over the place. But I know you'll come and find me, and I look forward to it.